What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the stack. Welcome back if you've been here before. I'm neonmushroom, and today we have another EDH/Commander gameplay video. Quick little thing, there are two decks that are being played that I'm super pumped to have on the show today. One of them's my Varina build that I've been calling Rot Farm. If you're on our Discord, because you're a patron, you've already seen this list, you kind of know what the game plan is. You may have even had some input on some selections that were made in the deck, so shout out to you guys on Patreon that are in our Discord that had a look at that deck. And there's a Jeska Thrasios build that I'm also really excited about that was kind of constructed by Calvin and Ajdin. So I hope everyone's excited for those. You'll learn a little bit more about those in both the opening hand screen and in the game itself. And speaking of the opening hand screen and the game, let's go ahead and take a look at who's playing, what decks they're playing, the opening hands they've decided to keep, and some normal upkeep stuff.
As always, if you like this show or any of our other shows on YouTube, liking, sharing, and subscribing helps us out immensely. If you like our content and don't mind that extra mile, you can always support us over on Patreon, over at patreon.com/mtg the stack.
Like James Delenti. Look, I'm sorry, I'm not at the normal studio space. Normally I'd have Calvin shout this out, but he's not here and I gotta put this video out like in 2 minutes.
Comment down below any of your thoughts and feelings, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Okay, first up we have Ajdin playing the partner pairing of Jeska, Thrice Reborn, and Thrasios Triton Hero. This is going to be a lands matter build. He's going to want to accrue a ton of lands into play and use something like a Valakut in conjunction with a Scapeshift, or maybe a Field of the Dead to win the game using mass damage. He's going to keep a 7-card hand, including a Forest, a Scapeshift, a Strip Mine, Explore, Verdant Catacombs, Nature's Lore, and an Hour of Promise. Next up, there's me. I'm going to be playing a new build I've decided to call Rot Farm, and this is a Zombies tribal deck using Varina as the commander, and we're looking to draw as many cards as possible to assemble a Gravecrawler combo. I'll also be keeping a 7-card hand, including a Marsh Flats, a Morphic Pool, Island, Darkwater Catacombs, Cemetery Reaper, Talisman of Dominance, and a Crypt Breaker. Then we have Calvin playing his Queen Marchesa build. This is a tap-out control deck looking to use Marchesa as a card advantage engine out of the command zone in order to accrue enough resources to control the board and win the game with haymakers in the late game. Calvin keeps a hand of 7 cards with an Erebos, God of the Dead, Toxic Deluge, Blood Crypt, Swamp, Mountain, Polluted Delta, and an Arid Mesa. And finally, we have a deck that a lot of you may be familiar with if you checked out our Commander Legends gameplay video. This is going to be Guy's Blim Comedic Genius deck, and he's looking to use Blim basically just for all of its text. He wants to play a lot of permanents that no one wants to have, and gift them using Blim. Guy's the last of us to keep a 7-card hand, and he keeps Shredded Sails, Captive Audience, Vampiric Tutor, Atrial Flow, Waste Knot, Dragon Skull Summit, and Marsh Flats. 1, 2, 3.
Because you see, that's Moltres, but that's Moltres. But that's Zapdos, but that's Zapdos. But that's Articuno, but that's Articuno. He has all 3.
You're such a fucking nerd.
I opened this in the parking lot of a 7-Eleven right off the expressway.
Ajdin won, so we'll start by drawing a card and playing a Verdant Catacombs and just passing the turn. I'll play my own Morphic Pool, and I'll immediately tap it for a black to play Crypt Breaker and pass to Calvin, who will draw a card, and he's going to drop Polluted Delta as his land for turn. We'll go to Guy's turn, he'll play a Marsh Flats, and just pass the turn back to Ajdin. He'll play a basic Forest as his land for turn, he'll crack his fetch land dropping to 39 to go grab a Tropical Island and put it into play untapped. He'll tap 2 for a Nature's Lore, search his library for a Taiga, and then I'll just pass the turn to me. I'm going to untap, draw a card, and head straight into combat. I'm going to attack Ajdin for 1, he doesn't block because he doesn't have a blocker, so I'll take it. Then I'll play Darkwater Catacombs, tapping for 2 to play Talisman of Dominance, and I'll try to pass the turn to Calvin, but he wants to fetch first. He'll drop to 39, get a Savai Triome, untap, and draw his card for turn. Calvin keeps it simple, he's just going to play a basic Plains as his land for turn and try to pass. Guy does crack his fetch first to go get a Badlands, and then I'll tap that Badlands for black mana in order to cast Vampiric Tutor, dropping to 37. He'll get a Words of Waste, add that to the top of his library, untap, and I'll draw his card for turn. He's going to play a Dragon Skull Summit and then tap 2 for Waste Knot. With nothing else, I'll pass the turn to Ajdin. Ajdin will draw his card and play a basic Forest as his land for turn. Then I'll tap for 2 mana to play Explorer. This will have him drawing an extra card, and I'll play an extra land in Mana Confluence. Then I'll tap 2 more lands to play Thrasios, and then I'll pass the turn to me. After drawing, I'm going to play a Marsh Flats, immediately cracking it to drop to 39, and I'll search my library for a Godless Shrine, and I'll shock it in, dropping to 37. Then I'm going to tap out and cast my commander, Varina Lich Queen. We'll head to combat, and I'll turn my Crypt Breaker sideways. This time I'll swing at Calvin. This will trigger the Varina. I'll draw a card and gain a life, and then I'll drop a creature, causing Guy to make a zombie off of his Waste Knot. Calvin takes the damage, and we move to Calvin's turn. He'll play a basic mountain as his land for turn, then he's going to tap out for an Aura of Silence. With nothing else, he's going to pass the turn over to Guy. He'll untap, upkeep, and draw his card for turn, and then play Mana Confluence as his land for turn. He'll tap out, losing 1 to the Mana Confluence in order to play Atrial Flow. Calvin has a response. He wants to blow up the Waste Knot using his Aura of Silence, and this all resolves. 2, 3.
Lands.
That's a grave crawler.
Yeah, that. Oh man, I could have so much mana. Alright.
Here we go!
After all of that, we're going to move over to Ajdin's 4th turn. He'll draw, and then he's going to move straight to his first main phase, tapping out, losing 1 to his Mana Confluence, and he'll play Hour of Promise. He'll then search his library for an Ancient Tomb and a Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle, putting them into play tapped, and I'll pass the turn to me. I'll draw my card for turn, and then I'll play a basic Plains as my land for turn. I'll head into combat, attack Calvin for 5, triggering the Varina twice. I'll gain 2 life and draw 2 cards, then I'll discard 2 cards. We'll go to damage, and Calvin has to take all 5 of the damage, going up to 4 commander damage. Then I'm going to tap 1 black and cast that Gravecrawler out of my graveyard, and then we'll tap for 2 more, and I'm going to cast Demonic Tutor. I'll search my library for a copy of Fierce Guardianship, add that to my hand, and then we'll pass the turn to Calvin. Calvin's going to untap and draw his card for turn, then he'll play a basic Swamp as his land for turn. He's going to tap for 3 mana and pay 4 life in order to try to Toxic Deluge. I have a response. I'm going to cast Fierce Guardianship out of my hand for free, countering the spell.
Probably tutored for that.
Correct.
Pass.
After passing to Guy, he'll draw his card for turn, and unfortunately he has no actions, so we'll pass the turn right back over to Ajdin for the 5th turn cycle. He's going to head straight into combat, attacking Calvin for 1. Calvin takes it. Then Ajdin's going to tap out, losing 2. It should have been 3. We forgot about the Mana Confluence here. He casts Ugin, -4s the Ugin and wipes the entire board. With nothing else, he'll pass the turn over to me. I'll untap and I'll draw my card for turn. I'm going to tap for 2 mana and play Arcane Signet. Unfortunately, I do not have a land drop this turn. Then I'll tap for 3 and I'll play Plague Belcher, and when it triggers, I'll put 2 -1/-1 counters on the Plague Belcher. Then I'm going to pass the turn to Calvin, who will untap and draw a card. He'll then tap out and cast his commander, Queen Marchesa. He'll become the Monarch, and she does have haste, so he's going to get right into the red zone with Queen Marchesa on Ugin. This will kill the Spirit Dragon, and with nothing else, Calvin will draw a card for being the Monarch, try to pass the turn. Guy's going to cycle Shredded Sails first, and then we'll move to Guy's turn. He'll untap and draw a card for turn. Guy's going to play Cavern of Souls, naming Imp as his land for turn, and then I'll tap out, losing 1 to the Mana Confluence to cast his commander, Blim, Comedic Genius. With that, we'll move over to Ajdin's next turn. He'll untap and draw a card. Then he'll play City of Brass as his land for turn. He's now going to begin to float all of his mana. He's going to take a grand total of 3 damage to his lands. He did remember the Mana Confluence this time, and he's going to use 4 of that floated mana. He has a total of 9, and he's going to cast Scapeshift. He's going to sacrifice all of his lands, hold for the Valakut, and then search his library for a Vesuva and 7 separate mountains. The Vesuva enters as a copy of Valakut, so he's going to have 14 Valakut triggers. He's going to use that to wipe the board, bring me to 37, and kill Calvin. Now, he does still have some mana floating, so he's going to use some of it to cast his Thrasios for the 2nd time out of the command zone, and then pass the turn to me. I yet again do not have a land drop for the turn, so I'm just going to tap all of my mana and cast Varina for the 2nd time, and I'll pass the turn over to Guy, who will draw a card, play a Bojuka Bog tapped, exiling Ajdin's graveyard. Then I'll tap for 4, dropping to 34 to play Lightning Greaves and Torpor Orb, and then I'll pass the turn over to Ajdin for our 7th cycle of turns. Ajdin's going to start with an island as his land for turn, then he's going to tap 4 mana in order to spin the Thrasios, and he'll find a Harrow. He wants to keep that on top, so we'll put it into his hand. He'll tap 3, and then he'll cast the Harrow, sacrificing a mountain. He'll search his library for 2 mountains. That'll give him 4 Valakut triggers. He'll use 2 of them to kill my commander, and the other 2 to bring me down to 31 life. I'll rezone my commander to the command zone, and then we'll pass to my next turn. I'll draw my card for turn, and then I'll tap 2 to play Dimmer Signet, and try to pass the turn to Guy. But before I can, he'll pay 4 life and try to snuff out Thrasios. Before this resolves, Ajdin will spin the Thrasios, getting a mountain, 2 Valakut triggers. He'll bring me down to 25, and then Guy will untap and draw his card for turn. He'll tap out for 4 mana, and he'll play Kolthner's Plans, exiling the top 7 cards of his library, and he will not be able to draw while the plans are in play. After that, he'll pass the turn over to Ajdin, who will untap and draw his card for turn. He'll then tap for 3, and he will play Crucible of Worlds. He'll then play his land for turn out of his graveyard. It'll be a mountain. He'll bring me down to 19 life. After that, he's going to tap for some mana and recast his Thrasios. With nothing else, he'll pass the turn over to me. I'll draw my card, then I'm going to play a Mana Crypt. Then I'll tap for 8 mana to cast my commander Varina for the 3rd time this game. I'll then pass the turn to Guy, who on-taps and skips his draw step. He'll simply tap 1 mana to play Sol Ring and pass the turn right back over to Ajdin. Before he can, Ajdin's going to spin Thrasios. He'll look at the top card, decides he likes it, it's a Wilderness Reclamation. Then Ajdin will on-tap and draw his card for turn. Ajdin's going to start his main phase by counting out 4 mana to play Wilderness Reclamation. This does resolve, so then Ajdin's going to tap for 4 more and spin Thrasios. He doesn't like what he sees, so he's going to scry it to the bottom of his library, then he'll look at the top card and reveal a Fierce Guardianship. He'll add that to his hand. He'll then tap 4 mana once again to spin Thrasios. He doesn't like this card either, so he'll put it on the bottom, and then off the top he's going to reveal Thespian Stage, which comes into play tapped. Then I'll move to his end step, and with his Wilderness Reclamation trigger on the stack, he'll float 1 mana, then I'll untap all of his lands. He'll use 3 more mana in conjunction with the one he floated in order to spin Thrasios. This is going to put a Forbidden Orchard into play tapped, and I'll pass the turn to me. We'll start my turn with the Mana Crypt trigger. I'll flip a coin, and I hit tails, which means I take no damage. Then I'll draw my card for turn, and I'm going to turn Varina sideways at Ajdin. Triggering Varina, I will gain a life, draw a card, and discard a card. Ajdin doesn't want to block, so he's going to take 4 commander damage, and then in my second main phase, I'll activate Varina, exiling 2 cards from my graveyard to make a zombie token. Then I'll tap for 2 more, and I'm going to cast Diabolic Intent, sacrificing the zombie token. Then I'll search my library for a copy of Approach of the Second Sun, add it to my hand, and then we'll pass the turn right back over to Guy. He'll untap, skip his draw step, and tap 6 mana to cast his commander out of the command zone for the 2nd time. He'll then equip it with Lightning Greaves and head into combat, attacking Ajdin for 4. Before damage, Ajdin's going to put all that mana to good use and overload Cyclonic Rift. This does resolve, it's going to bounce all permanents that don't belong to Ajdin, and then Guy's going to pay a life, play Sol Ring, and put that Lightning Greaves back into play, and he'll try to pass the turn. Ajdin has an action, he's going to spin Thrasios again. This hits Mountain, that's 2 Valakut triggers, and it drops me down to 14. Then we'll move to Ajdin's 10th turn. He'll untap, draw, and he's going to start his turn by making his Thespian Stage into another Valakut. Then he's going to play Dryad at the Elysian Grove, making all of his lands mountains. He'll turn Thrasios sideways at me, bringing me to 13, and then he'll spin his Thrasios. He'll scry to the bottom and reveal Training Grounds, adding that to his hand. Then I'll tap for a blue to play the Training Grounds, meaning Thrasios only costs 2 to spin now, so he'll spin Thrasios, giving me the token off of his Forbidden Orchard. He'll put Blighted Woodland into play, which is also a mountain, so I take 9 off of Valakut triggers. He'll then spin Thrasios again, this time hitting Misty Rainforest, dealing 9 more to me and putting me out of the game, and he'll deal some more damage to Guy. At end step, he'll float a mana in response to his Wilderness Reclamation trigger, untap all of his mana, he'll fetch, losing a life to get a Breeding Pool, which is also a mountain, so Guy will take 9, he'll shock the Breeding Pool into play. Then he will spin his Thrasios yet again, looking at the top card, putting it on the bottom, and it's another land, comes into play tapped, and deals 9 to Guy. He'll spin Thrasios one more time, put it on the bottom, look at the top card, it winds up being another land, which kills Guy. Ajdin wins the game.
Is it over?
You win.
You win.
That was awesome. Turn 10's not bad for a Lands Matter deck, given the Jeska Thrasios deck did the combo, the Valakut combo. We'll get to that in just a moment. Here at the end, I want to talk about how everyone's decks performed, from the least impactful all the way to the most impactful. When the most impactful deck is also usually the winner. Sometimes it's not, but that's the order I do it in. And I've noticed that after editing the last few videos that I've dropped, the ones that go through my entire editing process, the end of the video takes a little bit longer to wrap up than I'd like. And I saw some comments saying that like, hey, maybe not so much wrap up at the end, because some of these decks didn't do anything, and you can kind of say that. So I'm gonna try to practice that here. We'll start with Calvin's Queen Marchesa deck. The deck suite is a kind of a tap out control deck. It didn't get to execute its game plan. The game started moving very quickly thanks to the Jeska Thrasios deck. He did try to Toxic Deluge, that wasn't good enough. He was able to take out the Ugin, that also wasn't good enough. He was put out of the game very quickly. He was the first one to die to the combo, so he is out of there. Then we've got Guy and his Blim deck. This deck, you guys saw it win the big produced video we did for the Commander Legends gameplay, and you saw it get second place in the video that followed that. Here, I think the power level was just maybe too high on the other side of the table, and the game moved a little bit too quickly. Guy couldn't quite keep up. The Kulfner's plans was sweet, but we really didn't see a whole lot from Guy's side. He didn't even get to use his Blim. His Blim was dealt with both times that he cast it. Then there's me, and I'm going to take a second to talk about me, because some of you who kind of have seen the list for my Varina Rot Farm deck might know just how close I was to actually winning. There was a point in the game that you guys didn't see because of movie magic. We get to edit all that talking out that we think is going to be kind of boring for for the video, but there was a point where I attacked with Jeska and Crypt Breaker. If I had one more mana, I would have been able to win the game that turn. My hand consisted of 2 tutors and a Plague Belcher. And if I have Gravecrawler, which I had from the discard off of Guy casting the, I think it was Aetherial Flow, the one that has each of us discarding 2. That Gravecrawler I already had access to. I had the Plague Belcher in my hand, so all I needed to do was go get a Phyrexian Altar, and I won. I was actually a mana short to make any of this work because I had to get the Plague Belcher into play and tutor for the Phyrexian Altar. I was exactly 1 mana short, and we didn't end up getting there because Ajdin then proceeded to do the thing he did with Ugin, which is exile my main game plan. I was able to find the approach of the Second Sun. It was a little too late. Ajdin's engine was already rolling, and now that we've talked about Ajdin a couple times, let's just move straight over to him and his game plan. You're gonna see a lot more of this Jeska Thrasios build. I had my own that I wanted to build and play on the channel, but after Ajdin and Calvin brought this list to the channel, I was initially like, I think there's a better way to build this deck. Then we played a few games and I was like, I get it, this is sweet. In these Lands Matter decks, you're gonna have access to a ton of mana in the early game because you're playing your Explorers and your Burgeonings and you're getting a lot of extra lands into play. You needed a way to dump that mana, and Thrasios is perfect. Also, it gives you access to more mana, which you guys saw in this game. He did the Scapeshift thing at the end of the game. That's how he ended up winning the game. There were a few avenues he could have taken. After getting as much mana as he had, he probably could have done something with Jeska where he just recast it a couple of times to clear the board, deal a bunch of damage. He had a lot of routes to victory here, and that's really all there is to it. He was able to do the Valakut combo. This also works with Field of the Dead, although the Valakuts, the Molten Pinnacle, is a little bit more, you get your gratification more instantly. He's able to actually take Calvin out the first time that he did the Scapeshift, and from there, every time he span his Thrasios, got a land. If it was a mountain, it dealt 6 damage. Thespian stage became a Valakut. Now he has 3 Valakuts. Now he's dealing 9. At the end of the game, he played Dryad of the Elysian Grove. Everything was mountains. It was brutal. We all got wiped out by Ajdin. It was awesome. That's all I have for you guys today. Real quick, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for watching through 2020. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is the last video that Calvin and I are going to be uploading here in 2020. So look forward to it's going to be happening in 2021. We'll probably put out a piece of content talking about our plans moving forward because we have some pretty cool stuff we're going to start talking about, like streaming starting in January. We're probably going to start on Arena, but we got some plans to make it more the stack centric for, you know, the content we put on this channel. So keep that in the back of your minds. Like I said, that's all I have for you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, see you next time.